What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Jay Martin. Welcome to the show.
How's it going, man?
Hey,
Thanks for having me.
it's going well. I'm excited to talk to you. Good buddy of ours, Adam, who wrote Corollary, connected us together, and we're like, hey, you guys got to talk comics. So you got a book coming out in July called Lost Boy, and I'm really excited to talk about that. But before we do, I've got to know, did you always like comics as a kid, or is this something that you kind of stumbled into later on in life?
I was like raised on comics. I grew up in a house where my father was a cartoonist
Mm.
and he did like a syndicated newspaper comic. He still does it called Mr. Boffo, but he was always doing comics and he had a problem with television. If there was a television on, he would watch it and not do his work and not do his comics. So he banned television. So we had no TV when I was a kid, and my brothers collected comics. They were much older. I had brothers that were like 5 and 10 years older than me, and they'd been collecting comics. So they had just like bags and bags of like old Conan the Barbarian and Avengers and every old comic. And I would just read comics as a kid and draw the comic characters. Like that was my
Yeah.
entire childhood. And yeah, I was like obsessed as a kid. Just it was all comics all the time. And I still like people will talk about like they'll be like, "Oh, remember that Brady Bunch episode?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, totally," but I'll have never seen it because I missed out on like an entire era of television.
So you just kind of have to fake it a little bit, like,
I
yeah, okay,
totally fake it.
because it's a lot easier to just be like, yeah, and then they're not going to question it. Then like,
Oh,
yeah, had TVs banned in our house, so that's just a whole nother can of worms you don't need to open up.
yeah. So yeah, I was like a comics. Yeah, that's how I learned how to draw. So I was just like
Okay,
drawing constantly.
okay. So was there a lot of watching your dad work that kind of inspired you, or learning your craft as an artist then too?
Definitely. And definitely like watching the process and
Mm.
like seeing him do, just knowing like the fundamentals, I guess, that like people might not pick up on, like your penciling and your inking and you're erasing it and then you're putting in the zipatone. I mean, this is before computers and stuff. So it was like it was watching that technical process. I think it was helpful because I would just follow his lead.
So where at the point in your journey did you go from, okay, I like comics, and you were, like you said, you were doodling, you were working on stuff as as a kid, to say, I want to create a comic book?
Um, it was a long, really long journey that was circuitous because I did try to go into newspaper comics when I was like right out of college. I came up with an idea and I pitched it and it got going and I really felt maybe I didn't feel it. Feel I don't know, maybe it was I didn't I didn't want to go right in line with what my father done.
Yeah.
So I was sort of when that fizzled out, I was really happy to like start a new chapter. And I'd always also been interested in film, and I was like, I I felt like giving film a try was like sort of my first career, I guess, was going into storyboarding.
So what is, because we messaged to set up this interview, and you sent me stuff from IMDb and your website and all the stuff that you worked on, like music videos and storyboarding and things like that. So what is it, the process of like a storyboarding then? Because seeing some of those credits, like, how does that work for someone that's
So
just is
I
like, I just read comic books?
so I was okay. So it all starts with, first of all, you have to read a lot of comic books to learn how to draw like that. And so with the storyboarding, I was in graduate school in New York, and I was for like fine art for painting, and I was really wanted to get into film, but I just didn't have a clue as to how to do it. Like I wanted to be a director. I was obsessed with music videos. I wanted to direct music videos, and I was like, how the hell does someone do that? And I was at this exhibit where there was some storyboards for a movie were on display in this like gallery. And I looked at them and I was like, oh my God, I can do that. I can draw those pictures. And I could I knew I could do it. So I basically just packed up all my stuff and drove out to LA and and showed up at like an agency that represented storyboard artists. And I had drawn all these pictures and storyboards, and I was like, here, I can draw this stuff. Can you guys represent me? And they were like, that's adorable, but you don't know anything about film. And this is like, these are just like comic book drawings. Like, I don't think so. And so I was like, oh shit, this is bad. So I, I just started trying to get film experience,
Okay.
and I just storyboarded all these student films. And I try to go to as many parties as I could to try to meet as many people as I could. And I was super lucky. I met this guy named Mark Bristol, who was he had just storyboarded the Terrence Malick film, The Thin Red Line.
Yeah.
And he was like a sort of big storyboard artist. And we met at a party, and I was like, I want to do that. And he was like, if you're serious, come over tomorrow at 9 a.m. and I'll show you how to do it. And so I went over to his house, and he basically just spent the day with me, like showing me all the details of how he does it, showed me books that he read, like this book of storyboarding. I think it's called Frame by Frame. But he just basically like, I mean, we've been friends since then, and he's an amazing guy. And he basically showed me the ropes and was like, "This is how you do it. These are like all these like sort of cinematic rules." And so that was basically what kind of helped me figure it out. And then doing all these student films, I was able to build up like a portfolio of work. And then I went back to that agency, and I was like, hey, look at all this stuff. And they were like, oh, okay. This all happened in like, I think this is like a month of like me running around LA frantic, because I was like sleeping on someone's couch in Venice. And I was like trying to figure this out. So I got them to represent me. And then this was like the luckiest thing that happened to me is I become friends with this guy Mark Bristol, who kind of showed me the ropes. And this is right around the time the movie Being John Malkovich was coming out, and Spike Jonze was like really popular and really cool and doing all kinds of stuff. And he called Mark to do a job, and Mark was doing some other job out of town. He's like, I can't do it, but you should check out this guy Jay Martin and see if he'll do it. And I was like, yes, please. So I went, and I got to work with Spike Jonze on an Eminem Dr. Dre music video that never ended up getting made. But I got to spend like, I don't know, 2 or 3 days with Spike Jonze working out of like the old propaganda offices, storyboarding this insane video that I think was like, there were like polar bears and like an ice storm in Los Angeles. And it was like the coolest thing. But after I did that, I had like this credit of working with Spike Jonze. So suddenly all these other music video directors were interested in working with me. And I got to work with this guy, Francis Lawrence, who was super helpful and influential. This director, Paul Hunter, that I spent a lot of time with. And I just basically learned from these music video directors kind of the craft, and got to be on set and observe and just learn the film craft through them.
And then at one point, you eventually then started to take over and doing some stuff of directing yourself, because looking at your credits, you have directed so many music videos. I'm like, I've watched that one. I've seen that one. I've seen that one. I know that one. I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah, that was like I was like, this would be it was like my idea of like, this could be film school. Like I could draw my way through film school, and I could learn from all these guys, and ended up doing movies for a lot of them. And I don't know, it was like a really good education. And then, when I was sort of built up enough confidence, I guess I started directing things, and eventually got into music videos myself. And first video I did was Death Cab for Cutie. It was the new year, and it was like they had like no budget. It was like very small budget. And then so I put like a bunch of my own money into it to make it better. And I was like, this is going to be a disaster. What did I do? And then I remember like standing in my living room, and it was like MTV was on, and all of a sudden the video came on. It was like this huge band. I was like, whoa, Death Cab's on MTV, and it's my. I was like, oh god. So that turned out to be like a good investment, because that when that video came out, it was like that band had been like really cool indie band, and now they were sort of breaking into mainstream with that album, and so it helped me to get a lot more jobs and be able to work as a director.
Yeah, it's so cool. And so, all the times of working on, music videos, storyboarding and stuff, having the background, you started, let's talk about this comic that just checked out, Lost Boy. It's coming out with Dark Horse. How did this idea come about? How did you say, like, this is a story I want to tell?
I think it came from, so there were a couple things. I've always been fascinated with these kind of survivor stories,
Mhm.
like Castaway, or like there seems like there's so many of these in the news. You hear about the one survivor, the plane crash, or there's a book Hatchet about a kid who survives a crash, and I think Hatchet was influential because it was like the kid in Hatchet is like the opposite of the kid in my story. And I was sort of thinking, like, what if it was like the worst, like the least likely, like I think having raising kids in Los Angeles today and trying to imagine like my son getting like in this situation, I'd be like, this would be like, they play video games, they hang out with their friends, they go to the mall. There's like, skiing is like, this completely wild experience. They're not like, you know, it's these modern day city kids. Like,
Right.
how would they react in this sort of situation? And I was thinking back, and I was like, oh my god, that's literally there's like a Jack London story. I think it's called To Build a Fire. That is that story, and I like reread it, and I was like, oh, it's so wild. Like that's what this story is about. It's about a guy who goes up to the to go the Klondike, I think, to be like a miner or something and make a fortune, but he doesn't know anything about the outdoors, and it doesn't it's a tragic story. But I think it was, so I was like, oh, there's a tradition here.
Mhm.
And so I was like, this is a really interesting idea for me to like dig into and like make like this sort of survival story about a very unlikely survivor.
Yeah. So we kind of hinted at it a little bit of the premise of the book. What essentially is the elevator pitch of this story?
The elevator pitch is a young boy is the lone survivor of a crash in the wilderness and has to survive, and does so in a surprising way.
Yeah. It's it's a great book. I got to check it out in previews. I'm excited to see what other people get to experience it and stuff. But one of the things I really appreciated is you did everything except for what, the lettering, right?
Yes.
So writer, artist, like that's a lot. And man, how was that process for you of like saying like this is a story I want to tell, and creating the story, but also deciding that you're gonna do the art for it? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, I think it was one of those things I've been like itching to do like for years. Like I've always been like, I gotta do a comic, gotta do a comic. I gotta just do this because I mean, I read comics. But like it's my like, and when I'm drawing, even when I'm directing these videos, I draw storyboards for the videos before I shoot them. So it's like I'm always doing this, and I'm always saying like, got to do it. And I think when the pandemic hit, that became the time to do it. So I mean, I loved the process and being able to so when you're making a film, there's a lot of input and there's not a lot of chance to like redo things
Mm.
in film. Like you sort of set out a plan, you have your shoot day, and you have some options, but your flexibility is baked in by like what sort of assets that you've chosen to have on set on that day. And with the way my process worked with making this book is like I would draw a scene and lay it out and pencil it in, ink it in, sometimes color the whole scene. And then I'd be like, you know what, there needs to be something more here. And I'd go back into it and I'd redo it. And I'd spend a lot of time like kind of building out scenes and doing a kind of revising that I'd never had the luxury to do in filmmaking. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed that process.
Well, and you can tell how much storyboarding has been a part of your, process of creating here because it it feels like there's very little dialogue and I'm just like I'm visualizing the story as I'm going through with the panel layout and stuff. And you have moments where you have like I think there was like a 3 panel page and like stuff breaking the barrier of it, crossing over all 3 panels of that. Like I was just like, this is such a cool concept and things that you were doing, like little things like that just made the comic really pop.
Cool, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I've got to ask of the idea of when you're creating this comic, like, do you gravitate towards doing the art aspect of comics, or were you like, you wanted to get your writing chops in a little bit of his.
I guess. I mean, I feel like I'm always like writing
Okay.
stuff and coming up with ideas and so this was a way to like create an idea and tell the story and just sort of just do it and not have to like ask someone permission or get the money to do it or it was just like doing it. Like I when I did this book, I sat down and just did it. Like I had made like I probably had done like the first 5 pages or something
Okay.
for the pandemic, and they were just sort of sitting there, and I was like my typical mentality was before this was like, oh, you create like a pitch and then you present it, and if someone buys it, then you do it. But then in the pandemic, I was like, I'll just do this. Like it's just what am I gonna do? I'm
So
not
did
doing
so
anything
did
else.
you create the whole book first and then took it to a publisher?
I mean, I took it. So this is the. So what happened was it was Sean Mendes basically inspired me to like do this because I've been doing a lot of videos for him, and we'd like developed a relationship over years of working together, and whenever I do a video for him, we do these animatics of the what would happen in the video before we'd shoot it. So he knew about my drawing background, and he was releasing an album like right in the sort of beginning of the pandemic 2020, I think. And his manager approached me and was like, hey, we're kind of around the idea of doing a comic book for his album release. Would something you want to check out or be interested in? I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So we did this whole exploration of what this would be. And I reached out to some friends I knew at Skybound
Mm-hmm.
and was like, how do you make a comic and how would we do it? It just kind of like got me into it, like got me thinking about it in a like a real way. And I was like, this is I was like very happy to like have taken that step. And then they ultimately were like, yeah, maybe not. But I was like, oh, I'm ready to do this comic. So I just started like I took those like 5 pages of The Lost Boy and I was like, all right, let's do it. And I just started going and it took a few months. And then it was funny because then there was like Sean had another cycle of videos and he was shooting something in Toronto. And so I flew up there to shoot and I had finished the comic and I gave it to his manager. He was like, I think he was the first adult that read the comic book. And I was like, check it out. We were talking about comic book. Here it is. I think and it kind of like, I don't know, it's definitely in the spirit of all the things we were talking about. I think
Yeah.
as far as like this sort of magical realism, but not, and sort of rooted and grounded, but yet like there's something there that's magical. I don't know. It was very in theme with what everything we had been talking about. So I was excited to show it to him. And I don't know how we got off this topic, but that was sort of like how the book got into the world because then he gave it to his agent at CAA, and then they gave it to like some comics people. This Jeff King, he's like the showrunner for Umbrella Academy,
Mhm.
and he ended up giving it to the people at Dark Horse, and then we started the conversation that ended up in me going with them.
That's that's so cool to like. I love that. Like when I asked you how did it come to Dark Horse, I didn't never would have imagined that it was Shawn Mendes originally wanted you to write a comic. You're like, but you're like, now I'm gonna do my own.
But it was, yeah, it was like, I think it was, I needed like him to like get me off my butt to like be like, okay, like do this, like
Uh,
this is, I don't know, it was definitely a good, a sort of like pointing in the right direction. And then he was amazing, like just being excited about it and being interested in, you know.
well, now I still want a Shawn Mendes comic.
I know, right?
Now you put that out into
There's
the
a,
ethos. Now I'm like, man, that'd be really good. I want that now too.
there were some cool, I don't know, I got to go look through that old pitch
That's,
deck. No, that was, but yeah, it's definitely, and yeah, the experience of making the comic
yeah.
was really good, and working with Dark Horse was really good. They just sent me, and last week they sent me the first, I guess, the galley copy of the book, and it looks beautiful. They did an amazing job of like putting it together, and Frank's lettering, like my lettering was not great. It was like adequate, but it's fun. It was fun to see it like brought to life with his
With
style.
some. So now this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a self-contained original graphic novel, right? Like not just like a one issue or minis. It's all contained into one issue or big boy, right?
It's just yeah, it's one story.
Yep.
It's just the story of this kid, and is he going to make it out or not?
That's so how can people, when's it come out? How can people
It
get this?
comes out July 20. Uh-oh, let me make sure I get this right. I don't have the wrong date, but so it comes out the July 25th in bookstores and July 26th in comic book stores.
That's so cool. You said you got one of the, preview copies from Dark Horse they just sent. How cool was that for you when you got the something that you created brought to life? Like I know you create so much other stuff and storyboards and film and music videos, but your own comic book had to be a cool feeling.
It was a great feeling. It was like something I'd thought about and imagined for so long, and so it was exciting to like actually hold it and be like, oh, okay,
That's
did
that
it.
it is the artwork in this game. I said it before, but like you have a way with coloring on this too that pops of, when you need the brightness there is, but you have these, just this kind of wintry gray blues. Like it's a beautiful book through and through.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I was really fortunate. I was able to spend a lot of the pandemic traveling around, and I spent some time in Wyoming and a lot of time in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's just that there was like really beautiful landscapes that I definitely put in that book.
And it shows. And I again, I hope people go check it out because everyone loves a good survival story, right? Like, will they make it, will they won't? And I love the idea, the premise that you're like, what if it's a kid who has no idea what to do in this setting like that? Just like, I'm just on my phone. And so it's just, you're like pulling stuff from real life and you're like putting your own kids in your comic book.
I definitely, um, yeah, it was definitely inspired by you know, raising kids in a city in
Yeah.
today's day and age. I think, it's not, they don't have the exposure to the wild.
Now
I
has this,
wouldn't either. I
no,
mean,
I
I
listen,
mean, I'm
I'm
just like this kid, by the way. I would be toast.
we're sitting here on our computers with technology and I'm just like, this is my happy spot.
Right. I don't. Yeah.
So has this then, creating Lost Boy, has this kind of sparked the, desire to do more creating like this? Or is this just like, this was one of those like I got what I wanted to accomplish, or
No, this is like, I mean, I really enjoyed the process. I loved it. I'm doing another book right now with Dark Horse. It's called Yellow, and I'm in the process of drawing, like right now, I'm probably almost 40 pages into it,
Mhm.
and just,
So once you had this book created, you know, you took it, got taken to Dark Horse, was then did that then open the door for conversations to say like I have more ideas, or like were they like, hey, you
yeah,
have
it
more
was
ideas?
yes, so it was really amazing because having basically when Sean Mendez's manager introduced me to his agent at CAA, they brought me to introduce me to lots of different comic people,
Mhm.
from different Boom and Dark Horse and AWA, and I knew people at Skybound. So I started as soon as like Lost Boy was like starting to happen. I was like going on the circuit and pitching so many ideas. I had like a lot of comic ideas. I have probably a dozen different pitches for comic series that I was like going, meeting with everyone and pitching them everything I had. Because I would send them Lost Boy and they'd be like, okay, cool, what else you got? And so it was amazing to get to meet the whole comic, all these different, editors and development people. It was like a whole new world that I'd never encountered, and it was amazing. It was great to meet everyone, and everyone, like the passion for comics, and just like it's just cool. It's just cool to There's a whole different world that I'd never encountered, and yeah, it was fun even pitching ideas and getting rejected like a bazillion times. It was it was good to it was good.
Yeah, and I, you know, we've talked about Lost Boy a lot, and I've been, you know, I'm really excited for when it comes out here at the end of July. And I kind of led you already with the question of, you know, but what else you're working on? You got another comic? Are there other things that we haven't gotten to talk about that you're kind of like, hey, I'd love to plug or talk about coming up besides Lost Boy here at the end of July?
I I mean, I definitely want to. Lost Boy is coming
Yeah.
out. I want to see people. I'm working on a new one. I don't know when that's going to come out. It's in the middle of, being doing all the illustration now. But yeah, I'm excited about that.
So where can people follow along with you, Jay, on what you're doing, what you're creating, and just so that way when stuff does come out and drop, they are able to stay up to date with it.
Oh, I mean, I'm on Instagram and I post. I try to like post anything that's like relevant with like what I'm doing, like whether it's videos or comic stuff. I definitely keep that updated.
Well, gang, I feel like Jay, I could sit there and talk to you about comics and just creating things all day long, but I want to respect your time. Gang, go check it out. Like you said, end of July 25th, that Tuesday, it's coming out in bookstores, and then 26th in comic stores. From Dark Horse Lost Boy. Jay Martin, thank you so much for just being on the show, talking about comics and creating with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. Gang, everything we talked about, all Jay's links will be in the description of this video, or if you're listening on the podcast, in the description of that podcast. But with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.